Welcome to the Give Back Lab. I'm your host, Daniela DeGrandi. You've entered a space where bold voices, real stories, and unfiltered conversations come to life. Here in the lab, we're breaking bias, shifting thinking, and exploring the power of giving back through truth, vulnerability, and diverse perspectives. We celebrate diversity of thought and everything beautiful that makes us human. This isn't just talk, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly the kind of space we need. We're unlearning, relearning, and evolving together. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Give Back Lab. Today, I have the honor of being joined by Brooke Grindlinger, who is the Chief Scientific Officer, and she is here to talk to us today about her journey as a woman in STEM and what that feels like as you navigate from, your first thought of, oh, I want to be a scientist. I love this science stuff. You go to college, what you think, you wear a lab coat. Do you not wear a lab coat? So you've gone through the spectrum. And I'm so honored to be talking with you. And I'm so excited to share with our audience your journey and all of the insights that you have to share in this space. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Daniela. I'm delighted to be here and chat with you today.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit. I know that you just did a commencement address, so that's really exciting. And tell us about the journey a little bit, right? Like what has your where has this when did you know you wanted to be a scientist? When you were a little girl? What was it? Give us your journey.
Sure. So I'm Australian and did all my education in Australia. And I think in high school, I had two very different interests. One was English and writing. I really loved um, writing and communications and telling a story and was very good at that. But I also loved the sciences because I was naturally curious about how things worked. And science gave me the opportunity to pose a question, and in class, we could conduct an experiment, and the data would give you an answer. And it was not particularly open to interpretation, and it was very sort of logical and methodical. And I really loved coming to understand how different parts of the world around us work through science. But in high school, I was one of, I think, 7 girls in my science classes as I got to 11th grade and 12th grade. All my science teachers were men, and I really struggled to see a lot of women in the science space, either immediately around me in school or even in the larger world around us. So I have to say, I kept my love of science a little bit hidden from the
Hmm.
environment around me. And I revealed to very few people about where I was applying to university and that I was interested in pursuing a science degree
Nice.
because I already felt that lack of encouragement for young women who might be interested in pursuing careers. So I kept my cards really close to my chest in that regard. But
Mm.
applied for a Bachelor's of Science degree, and I went to the University of Sydney in Australia. And that really sort of opened the door to me to all the different ways that science is active in the world around us. And I really fell in love with the topic of microbiology,
Mm.
coming to understand viruses, bacteria, that there's things living on us, in us, and around us that can kill us, can help make us healthy and keep us healthy. And I was really fascinated by all these things that can kill you, how we essentially wake up healthy every day.
Yes.
And so that was really an opportunity for me to really dive into curiosity about human health and disease as it relates to bacteria and viruses. So I pursued a bachelor's degree and then an honors degree. at university, and then went on to a PhD program where you really, for the first time, get to ask a question that you try and answer through scientific exploration that no one else has yet answered. So you're no longer learning from textbooks and what others have
Right.
covered, but you're really throwing the doors open to what's a really pressing question that no one else has answered, and you have the opportunity to try and find those answers. And I worked on the topic of tuberculosis, very
Okay.
important and still highly infectious disease today around the world. But as I came to the end of my PhD, I was starting to think about, okay, once I have degree in hand, what are my career options? And this was in the mid 90s and then early 2000s. Um, and I looked around me at the university and again could see very few women who were lecturers in scientific departments, who were leading their own labs and conducting research and leading teams. And so again, sort of struggled to find role models that I could mirror myself on and say, well, I could pursue that path and follow what that person has done. And there was really at that time one trajectory, one straight line. If you studied
Mhm.
science and got an advanced degree in science, the expectation was that you would go on to be a principal investigator, that you would lead your own research lab, either at a university or perhaps in industry, somewhere, for example, for a pharmaceutical company. And that was really all the options that were presented to me. And I didn't know what I didn't know about what
Right.
other career options might be out there for me. So it was actually a really lonely time in having that feeling that I've studied and invested all this time and money in acquiring an advanced education, and that society has a very straight line path for what it means to be a scientist. But having that uncertainty of, I'm not sure that's who I want to be and what I want to do, and what are the other career paths that I could explore. And I think a lot of people who've had that similar experience, even today, you've invested tremendous time, financial resources in pursuing a very specific path in your education and becoming qualified and sort of obtaining a title, whether that's I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a
Right.
scientist, I'm an accountant. You've got the degrees and the letters after your name. That there's some there's some fear that comes with thinking about, can I let those go and go in a different direction, take a different path than what most people with those qualifications and letters after their name probably pursue and what society expects of you. Um, and so I think a lot about that today when I talk to other younger scientists, and particularly women in science, tech, engineering, math, and medicine areas, about what are some of the other career paths that are available to you that might look a little different from
Right.
the traditional. And I think it's important to spotlight those opportunities, to um, to encourage people to explore their options, to sit with their uncertainty,
Yes.
be honest with the discomfort and the uncertainty that they might feel when they're navigating career paths at any point in their career, and giving themselves permission to pivot if that path is not for them, if they can feel that that is not going to energize and fulfill them,
Right.
at least in the next part of their career. Many of us pivot many different times over the course of our career. Um, so that's one theme that I sort of lean into a lot when advising the next generation of scientists coming through universities and pursuing early research careers. Um, and for me, so once I realized, this is not the path for me, what are some of the other opportunities out there? I leaned back into my love of English and communications and writing and storytelling, and wondered if I could marry my scientific and technical training with sort of storytelling and communications,
Hmm.
and made the shift into the world of science publishing. So for your audience who may not be sort of really aware of what the field of science publishing is, any new research that's being conducted today, say in university labs or even company labs, uh, the current route for having research disseminated broadly to the rest of the scientific community and society at large is to submit research to an academic, scientific, or medical journal for publication. And that process involves very rigorous review and assessment of the research by other experts in the field, and decisions about whether that research is sufficiently rigorous and robust and novel and cutting edge to then publish and disseminate to the rest of the community. So it's like a checks and balances before new data and results are proclaimed as true to the
Right.
world. It's a way that the scientific community sort of pressure tests its
Right.
ideas and its data. And the wonderful thing about that community is the scientific expertise that you gain through technical training as a scientist is very valuable at scientific and medical journals, because you need that technical understanding to be able to assess research and identify possible flaws, or suggest other experiments that might be needed to shore up the thesis and the idea that a particular group of researchers are putting forward with their research article that they've submitted for publication. And so I moved to the US and joined one of the leading scientific and medical publications here. And it published scientific discovery across not just microbiology and infectious diseases and tuberculosis, which was my original area of expertise, but across all areas of human health and disease. So I went from having very narrow but deep
Right.
knowledge about an area of science to suddenly having very broad but a little less deep knowledge in
Right.
areas like neuroscience and cardiovascular disease and endocrinology and oncology. So it was almost like continuing education. Again, curiosity driven in your job every day about being able to learn about scientific discoveries that others had made, but then helping scientists shape how they wrote about those discoveries and communicated them to their peers in their field, but also others in different areas of science and medicine. And then, of course, to the general public,
Right.
really making that leap between here's information that's very technical that the scientific community understands, but we want to share that with society at large and engage the general public in understanding about science, being enthusiastic about how science shapes our everyday life, and is a sort of positive force um, for us all around the world. And so I had a lot of fun with that, about storytelling through science to get other people excited about science, improve their scientific literacy, and help the general public to trust science and the scientific process and scientists and the work that they do in trying to, solve some of society's greatest challenges through science-based solutions.
Yes, that is fantastic. And I have 5,000 questions in my brain for you.
Go.
First of all, congratulations on moving from a very young, curious mind and turning it into something and just following your passion. You are a trailblazer and you have turned yourself into one of those people you as your young self was looking for. So congratulations and thank you very much, because we do need that. I want to start back then because I want to understand why you felt that you needed to keep it tight to the vest. Was it something, is it just who you are as your personality that if you're insecure you keep it quiet, right? And you do that in all avenues? Or was it when I tried to come out of my shell, I kind of got told to go back and then it shut me down? Was there something that happened to you that shut that part of you down? Because through your story, I see how you kept combating that. And it was almost, it to me, it feels almost like you're triumphantly fighting against this insecurity that young Brooke had.
Mhm.
And you have masterfully succeeded in that. So congratulations. But how was that born?
I think the two things that you touched on are both important parts of the story. So one around insecurity. Um, I would say I'm a type A personality and try to be a high performer in everything that I do, hold myself to high standards. Um, and I'm quite independent, which means I want to try and do things myself before
Mm,
maybe asking help from others. And so often I will keep my plans to myself just in case there's failure, just in case things
mm,
don't go quite the way I want. And even today, I can sort of keep my cards close to my chest. I'd rather deliver and share the great news when it's all worked out the way I was hoping it would, rather than be broadcasting my plans from the beginning and risk there's that sort of fear of failure and what will others think if you don't reach the goal that you've set for yourself and been sharing with others. I'd say there's pros and cons to that. Um, Sharing your goals with others often opens doors for others to help you along
right.
the way.
Okay.
So I have learned a little bit more and give advice to younger people in their careers that sometimes one of the best things you can do is share with others what you're looking for and what you need so they know how best to help you. Um, I think the people around us in our careers, almost everyone wants to help anyone if they can, in a small way or a large way, but understanding what would be the most helpful thing for that person that's asking for help, just giving the person a little bit of guidance as to what would be most helpful to you will often sort of fast track you to opening that door or getting that introduction or opportunity that would help you. So being a little vulnerable about, asking for help when you need it, I'd say it's something I continue to work on, asking for help from others rather than be stoic and wholly independent
Mm,
and try and do everything for myself. Um, I think definitely the other element of sort of the early Brooke evolution was being one of very few girls in my high school science classes and even in my university classes and all male teachers. And at that time there was definitely I could perceive the bias
mm,
messaging around um, girls aren't necessarily the best fit for careers in science and tech and math. And that was definitely messaging I felt, whether it was direct or just sort of unconsciously floated by the leaders and teachers around me. So that definitely made me turn inwards rather than lean into and be more outward facing about my interests in science. Fast forward to today, bias against women in STEM unfortunately still exists. Um, However, people are much more aware of it,
Right.
regardless of role, regardless of their own gender. Um, so I think there are a lot more checks and balances in place today as people move through educational pathways and through career pathways to recognize points where bias can come up and influence adversely someone's career trajectory or educational trajectory. And um, there are sort of plans and checks and balances in place now at a lot of institutions and employers to be aware of where are those common scenarios and what systems can we put in place to make sure that as an organization or an academic institution, we're sort of pushing back against where those biases may creep in. We're certainly seeing much higher rates of women entering college to pursue STEM careers. In many disciplines, many more women than men, but we're still seeing over the course of the educational pathway as people move into tertiary degrees like masters, PhDs, postdoctoral research positions, and then faculty positions, that the pipeline of women continues to narrow. And
Hmm.
we are losing really talented women um, as they progress over the course of their STEM careers. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And many organizations are working towards programs to engage and retain and support women across the spectrum of their career. And my organization, the New York Academy of Sciences, is certainly one of them. But today I'll say, at the faculty level at university, there's still only approximately, on average, about 30% of faculty members in STEM areas are women. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a little higher in areas like biomedicine and the life sciences and public health. And then it can actually be significantly lower in areas like physics, engineering, mathematics, computer science. So we still have a ways to go to reach gender equity. And there's so many more amazing women role models now in the STEM ecosystem that I think the next generation can look to and
Yes.
say, this is absolutely possible for me, and have access to those people as well.
Right. No, that's fantastic. Why is it that you think that you get to a certain point and that the group starts to narrow? Why after being in this industry and having lived through different spaces within it, why is that? Is it life and is it life? Is it do they pivot out of do they make a pivot like you did, right? Go from research and go into something maybe more creative? Um, I mean, I can totally see that as a woman, right? The creativity and the right. I also love to write and speak and have conversations, a lifelong learner. So I can understand that. Is that something that you see that it's maybe an in fact gender trait, if you will, that does that?
I I don't think it's a gender trait. I see exceptionally talented women in science and exceptionally talented men in science and exceptionally talented individuals across the spectrum of gender. Um, but as I said, there are inherent, um, unfortunately, still some unconscious bias that
Mhm.
exists in the larger ecosystem that can contribute to women and others, other sort of groups that are also underrepresented in STEM. It's not just women, but feeling a lack of community, a lack of support. Um, the generations ahead are often more men
Right.
in positions of power, which means at key decision-making points like promotion, tenure and career advancement that, in the absence of maybe broad gender representation and diversity on decision-making committees that are responsible for elevating others over their career trajectory. In the absence of that, we can sometimes see male candidates, uh, ascend faster than female candidates. I will also say, as we all biologically age, life outside of our work environment is often just as demanding, if not more so, than the hours of 9 to 5. And so, balancing the responsibilities of, for all of us as human beings, both during work hours and outside, can be challenging for anyone in any career path. But I
Right.
would say in the world of science, um, there is still very much a culture of, if you're going to be a principal investigator, lead a scientific lab, this is a 24/7 job. Um, it is often going to be the priority in your life and require a level of commitment that can really disrupt the work-life balance for many. And I think for women, they often will bear the burden of family and childcare
Right.
responsibilities. And while that's not the only factor, it remains an important one to think about, that it can be difficult if you have family, responsibilities, and bear the major burden of those responsibilities um, in your home life, to be all in that highly competitive culture of always on in the world of science. And so I have certainly seen, women peers and colleagues elect to look for, what are the alternate career paths I can take as a scientist that still highly value my scientific expertise and qualifications, but allow me a little bit more breathing room and balance in my life than this sort of more traditional career path for a scientist. And that's where I found, when I shifted into science communications as a career path, many of my colleagues around me were also brilliant scientists who were women who'd made
Right.
that switch into a nonprofit sector career, or just a slightly different path,
Right.
than a more traditional path, but still finding, opportunities for advancement and success and continued growth in their career, but offered them a little bit more balance in their life. So I do think that sort of key life, um, part of life, where it's
Right.
exceptionally competitive for scientists to, to start a lab, to be leading a highly successful lab in the volume of research and innovative research that it produces, to secure the financial resources to run a lab. It requires a tremendous amount of effort in grant writing and pursuing funds to do research. That that is such a sort of, you almost got to have a very myopic view, and that can be challenging for many. But with that said, I'm also starting to see a lot more flexibility in the world of STEM. Um, in terms of part-time faculty positions, acknowledging that you can be a
Right.
successful scientist, you can contribute to your institution at a very high level, make innovative discoveries, but not work a full-time role. So starting to see different institutions be more flexible in how they think about um, the employment framework for scientists, and acknowledging that um, there can be different ways of working that can still work for both the individual and the organization, and have wins for both sides, if you will, and giving that greater flexibility. And I'm hoping that some of those shifts um, continue to sort of evolve and grow and ripple out across the whole STEM ecosystem, so it becomes more of the norm to see flexibility than
Ex-
the exception. And I think as we've come out of COVID, work has changed for everybody. There's so much more remote work now and flexibility to work remote, either full time or for certain periods of time. And I think from that flexibility, even a lot of scientists have felt great. I can be in the lab when there's days that experiments need to be done at the bench, but I can also be at home and have a little bit more flexibility about life outside of work while doing
right.
my quiet work, my single work, my deep thought. I don't have to be surrounded by everybody in my lab and on site. So, as I said, I think the workplace is evolving in many different sectors, but also in the world of science. We may be just a
Right.
little bit more buttoned up in our sort of traditional thinking about what um,
R-
science looks like in the
what
workplace for scientists, but I think that's changing and changing for the good.
right. No, and I was going to say, is it really, if you choose to be in the lab and follow that path, is it really 24 by 7 dedication, or is that the bias? Because presumably you have a team of very qualified people. And if you are in charge of the lab and you have the proper people in the proper places and proper operational flow, there may be times where you pretty much live there for a period of time. But presumably, even if it's a man in that space, they're not sleeping in the lab. Right? Is that you may tell me no, Danielle, it's absolutely true. They got a little room in the back. It's like working the emergency room shift and you're there, having 23-minute naps. I have absolutely no idea. I just want to unpack if that is really reality or if it's that traditional bias.
Mhm.
And so then that traditional bias allows for the, I'm going to use word excuse, for the reasoning where they can keep it more male dominated or even non-family females in there, right? Because some women are career women and choose not to have families, and they're just so in love with their work, and I applaud them as well. But to me, I call bologna sandwich, right? I say it may have been that at one point, but if you are truly a leader and a leader of this work, it is not you doing the work, it is the team you are leading contributing to your success. So while you may need to be available a lot of the time, I think that if you are a true leader and you build a great team, that you can then have a balance of life, right? You're not going to have a 9 to 5, but who has a 9 to 5 anymore, right?
This is this
Um,
is true. This
even
is
with
true.
remote and work from home, even with remote and work from home, right? We have this remote work from home. I will tell you that the people who are truly working from home and are truly remote are they're giving 14, 16-hour days. They're giving more than they would if they were commuting to work 9 to 5,
Hmm.
right? They go
Hmm.
into the office, they have their coffee chats, they have a lunch with a friend, they have water cooler talk, whatever it is. When you're home, think about it. You get up, you get ready, you sit down at your desk and you grind. And I know so many people, I mean, I know myself, right? Sometimes you look up and it's 4 o'clock and you haven't even had lunch yet. So is that bias or is it real? And you can tell me, no, Danielle, it's totally real. This is the space. I have absolutely no clue. I just want to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so I love that you use the word leadership. I think every leader has a different leadership style, and they really set the culture for those that work with them on their team or at their organization. And I've seen different different types of leadership styles in the world of science. There can be those where there are very high expectations of presence in the lab and working long hours and always being available. There are others that their leadership style is, look, as long as you're making progress to the goals that we've set and the work is moving forward at an appropriate pace, how and when and where that work gets done, there's much more flexibility around that. Some of that's also dependent on the type of science that is being conducted.
Mm.
There's very practical science that requires presence in a research and laboratory environment, or requires your presence out in the field, collecting data, measuring data, and then bringing it back to the lab. For many scientists, they might work in a more theoretical field where it's a lot of deep thought, might be a lot of work on the computer, and doesn't necessarily require a physical presence using technical equipment in a lab environment. And so that affords a
Right.
tremendous amount of flexibility to sit at your local coffee shop and do deep thought, writing, work on algorithms or things that don't require other technologies that are only available in a larger, more structured research environment. So I think it depends on the field of science. It depends on the leader
Mm-hmm.
that you work with, and also the resources, honestly, that are available to any scientist and their team. Um,
Right.
there are research groups that are incredibly well resourced in terms of the research funding they have available to conduct their research, to the number of scientists on their team that they're able to hire and have working on any given project. Whereas there are other institutions and research groups that might not be as fortunate to be flush with a huge research team and a lot of scientists working on a single project, or a lot of financial resources to be able to purchase equipment and supplies to conduct very expensive research. So I think there are a lot of
Right.
variables that play into the sort of work environment, and it differs from place to place. I think now is a really there's a really challenging moment in time happening in the STEM ecosystem, particularly in the university landscape. There has been a reduction of federal research funding that is flowing from the government to support research at universities and research institutions in the United States. And an incredible amount of discovery and innovation that happens in the United States in the world of STEM happens at our universities and research institutes and government labs. And the government's investment in that early discovery has been so key for many, many decades. And so the landscape right now is really feeling a crunch of
Yeah.
a lack of financial resources to support research, um, a shift in the, I would say, borders around science and how people can move around the world as part of the science ecosystem uh,
Mhm.
to to study in the United States, to conduct research in the United States if they're not necessarily US citizens. So there's a lot of sort of shifting sands right now that is breeding
Mm.
uncertainty um, for um, for career opportunities for young scientists as well as senior scientists, for how research is funded, if if government dollars are not flowing into support research in the way that has traditionally been the model. A lot of exploration of how philanthropy and industry or other nonprofit organizations or high net worth individuals might be able to come together and help support continued scientific discovery at the same level that we've been fortunate enough to have here um, in the immediate future and in the long term. So I think that is also, it's like a number of pressure points that are being pushed on in this ecosystem. Um, and that's not to say it's isolated to science. I think it's a difficult job market at the moment, almost regardless of the sector. So there are a lot of factors at play that roll up to what the sort of day-to-day experience for a scientist might be right now, and what that might look like in the future. And it's causing a lot of people to think about how do we best support the scientific ecosystem in the US and around the world in light of some of these changing variables.
Thank you for that. That's incredible insight. So I would love to learn um, about what it's like to be a scientist in this field that you're in now, right? With this broader exposure. I totally understand and I get why viruses and bacteria and microbiology is so interesting. I find it fascinating as well. But now to go broader and have visibility and such an ability to learn and continue to learn and see things from a different perspective and a different lens. What does it look like in that space right now?
It's a great question. So I made the leap from being, an individual contributor as a scientist in the research and lab environment to jumping to scientific publishing. And then that led me to working today in the nonprofit sector. The New York Academy of Sciences is a nonprofit organization that supports scientists as well as science enthusiasts around the world. And we do that in three major areas: through supporting scientific research, so the work done by others and some of our own, supporting science education, and supporting science policy. So I sort of feel like I'm no longer an individual contributor that's leading. I need to find the answers to this one particular question through science. Now my approach is more about how can I leverage the platform of this organization to deliver the greatest impact to sort of society and the groups that we serve of scientists and those interested in science through the programs and activities of our organization. And we do some really incredible things that empower others to be most successful and impactful in their scientific careers, or how they might engage with and understand science. And so for me, it's become less about what I achieve and more about how can I help others in the STEM ecosystem achieve their best. So, a couple of examples. I mentioned that getting funding to support scientific research is very competitive for scientists. They're always applying for grants, competing against other peers in their field for the same grant dollars to bring back to their lab and fund the work that they're doing. Um, and it's very much a constant race and a cyclical race. You might,
Hmm.
you might get some funding to support your project for 1 year. So probably within 7 or 9 months of doing that work, you've got to start again to rewrite the next grant request or proposal to get the second year funding for that project. So it's like a hamster wheel that's very hard for a lot of people to be able to get off, or have many years of financial security to invest in a team and a research project that's going to take a number of years to mature and deliver results. And the funding mechanisms we have in place today for research, there's usually a few major funding bodies that make decisions about where the scarce dollars are going to be invested. Not everything can be funded in the world of
Right.
science discovery. So, some really great ideas that might be very out of the box, seem pretty off the wall, go unfunded and then unexplored. So, as an organization, we've been able to work with philanthropy, for example, where there are funding resources available to help steer resources towards the most talented individuals in the STEM ecosystem that have really interesting ideas, but they're often viewed as too risky
Mm,
or too unpredictable. The outcome can't quite be envisioned by a lot of other decision makers. So they're high risk, but they could be high reward if the ideas um, actually result in a new diagnostic or a new treatment or a new technology that might be deployed in the world. So one approach that we've taken is to search for exceptionally talented scientists who have proven themselves in the work they've done thus far to be
right.
innovative and have really creative ideas and to be able to lead research, and people that are early in their careers, so maybe not as established as a Nobel Prize winning scientist that everybody agrees is, the pinnacle of scientific thought and achievement, but focusing on people much earlier in their careers that have really interesting ideas, but perhaps no one's quite willing to take that risky bet on them. Can we come in with funding and support and say, we believe in you as a creative scientist based on the work you've done so far? What's your wild idea?
Mm-hmm.
Change the world. Let us give you some financial resources that give you the most flexibility to pursue that crazy idea that no one else will fund. And that gives these really talented, curious, innovative, pioneering young minds the flexibility to go after those crazy, wild ideas and see what eventuates. Um, so, one example is we have a program called the Blavatnik Awards for Young Scientists.
Sorry.
Okay.
Just go back to that. We have one crazy idea.
So, one program we have is called the Blavatnik Awards for Young Scientists. And working with the Blavatnik Family Foundation, that provides incredible philanthropic support in the science and medicine space, as well as cultural and other institutions around the world, we've been able to establish a program that finds exactly these types of innovative young scientists, provides them with unrestricted funding to pursue those high risk but potentially high reward paths of scientific exploration, and then also spotlight them and give them sort of the recognition now early in their career that you might otherwise only see reserved for those that win awards more towards the end of their career and become very highly recognized outside of the world of science. So we almost think of it like the young Nobel Prizes, that can we invest in these people now and their ideas that will just accelerate them on this exponential journey? Imagine what they might achieve. Um, Over almost 20 years, we've invested close to 20 million
Okay.
in approximately 500 early career scientists, and we've seen them post award go on to make incredible new discoveries. I guarantee there is probably not a person in the world who hasn't been touched by their inventive solutions and new discoveries. You might not know it, but they've touched society in so many different ways with their discoveries. And today they've built companies, more than 50 companies, that have brought their research ideas all the way to market. A new
Right.
product, a new diagnostic, a new therapy for disease that didn't exist before we provided them with this financial support to pursue the wonderful and wild idea, and the recognition to also just be elevated in the scientific ecosystem. And if I can give you one example, there was an early career investigator some years ago who he's a chemist, and he had an idea for how we could tackle the problem of forever chemicals. Forever chemicals are a group of chemicals that humans have made that have really unique characteristics. They don't naturally occur in nature, and they are found in our life around us in so many different ways. The coatings on our cookware that we use every day to make meals, to the fire retardants in our furniture and clothes so that things are a little bit more resistant to potentially catching on fire. Um, these chemicals, while they bring tremendous benefits to our daily life and materials around us, they have an unbelievably long shelf life and they don't break down quickly in the environment. And so what has happened is that they build up in their levels in the environment around us, in the soil, in water. Today, all of us have some level of forever chemicals present in our bodies because they're
Mm.
so ubiquitous in the world around us. And more recent work has started to link these forever chemicals and their high levels and presence in us and around us to certain types of diseases, including cancer.
Yeah.
So there's a recognition that we need to shift away from using these chemicals, but also discover ways to help break them down more quickly and easily in the environment so that we're not as exposed to them as we
Right.
are today. So this young chemist had an idea for how to break them down, a new chemical reaction to do so, but it seemed so wild that
Yeah.
he wasn't successful in getting more traditional funders to provide funding for him to pursue this rather, off the beaten path um,
Mm.
view of research. We recognized him with an award and provided him with some unrestricted funding in the last few years. And that afforded him, again, flexibility to say, okay, if no one else is going to fund this, here's my opportunity to now pursue this crazy idea. Within 2 years of winning the award, he had cracked the problem. He had discovered a
Wow.
new way through chemistry to break down forever chemicals. And it was like a half-page story in the New York Times and in newspapers around the world. So again, just what are the problems that are unsolved that we could try and solve through science?
Yeah.
Find talented young minds who have great ideas, if a little risky, but with
Yes.
some funding and support, have the flexibility and are empowered to pursue them. And then we stay in touch with them and see what that has afforded them the ability to push forward in terms of scientific discovery and bring forth amazing new benefits to all of us, not just those in the world of science. So our organization administers that program and helps identify that talent and support them and then track their contributions over time. And for me, even though I'm not the person putting on the lab coat every day and doing the scientific research myself, knowing that I can help direct resources and attention and provide support to talented young people that with just this little extra support could go so far and do such tremendous good for society at large. That to me is so much more impact than I think anything that I might have ever done as an individual scientist. So it brings me tremendous joy to help find these people, to get to know them, and to continue to follow their career and be a part of their journey
Yes.
in bringing discovery to society at large. So while I'm not a white lab coat working scientist at a bench myself anymore, um, I felt that that shift into the nonprofit sector where I can still do tremendous good. I still use my scientific expertise and skills, but being a lever that can exponentially impact others more so than I might have ever been able to do myself, has been very rewarding. Again,
Yes.
very different path from what I imagined, going into college that as a scientist I might do, but a very practical example of how you can pivot and still be incredibly fulfilled and have incredible impact on the world through empowering others.
Right. I love it. It is the ladder to leadership, right? So you as a young person, and as we've talked about from the beginning, as a young person, you had this dream, you had this vision, and you worked it. And as you grew in your career, you grew as a leader as well, right? So leadership is really about empowering others to do great things within our space. And I love that you've gotten to this point and that you're inspiring others, celebrating others, and helping uplift them. And hopefully the younger Brooks of today and tomorrow will feel more secure in being able to communicate and ask for guidance and have an open dialogue and conversation and not feel judged, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. The fear of failure to me isn't necessarily in the failure, it's in the judgment, because we learn through failure and we grow through uncomfortable situations. So failure to me is not something that we should be ashamed of. It's something we should celebrate and look at how it affected us in a growth trajectory in that space, rather than looking at it like, oh, I set out to do this and I failed. Well, okay, that's okay. But I learned these 10 other things along the way that I would never have learned. And so I'm not going to give up. I'm going to continue. But as you say, I'm going to pivot now with the knowledge and learning I have and continue. And I love the fact that you have gone through that in your life, um, through your unintentional journey, right? I don't think you intended to have this journey, but I love the fact, and I am so grateful for the STEM community that grateful for them and grateful to that, in honor of you, that they have you as a leader in this space. And I'm grateful that you have the opportunity to talk to young people and address them, and that you have been so giving of yourself to come back here, because that's really what the Give Back Lab is all about, right? It's about sharing ideas and thoughts with others in hopes of, you know, identifying and breaking bias and inspiring people. And you are truly, truly an inspiration. So thank you so much for being with us today. Is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with, uh, as we close?
A couple of pieces of advice that I usually pass on to almost any early career scientist I'm speaking to, and particularly for women in STEM, regardless of the career stage they're at. Always advocate for yourself. Not all of us are fortunate enough to have people in positions of power that might open doors for us or advocate for us in the room when we are not there. So I always tell people that you have to be your own best advocate and be asking for what you want and what you need, expressing to people where you want to go in your career so it's clear to them what your goals are and how they can help you get there. So you really need to be proactive and advocate for yourself and speak up and be proactive. And I also tell people to, if an opportunity crosses your desk and it scares you, you have to say yes. Unless it's dangerous, but
Yeah.
most of the
Right.
time it's not necessarily a question of, life or limb. But if it
Right.
makes you nervous, if it makes you uncomfortable, if you fear that you will fail at it, you have to lean into that opportunity and say yes, because you'll find yourself at the end of that experience emerging from it looking back thinking, you know what, that wasn't so hard. I was totally ready to do that. I had the skills to do it. And you realize how capable you are, and sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for how capable and ready we really are. So don't wait until you're ready. Lean into that discomfort and fear and say, yes, I will give that commencement speech at
Yes.
medical college, even though I'd never given a commencement speech and I felt nervous about it. At the end of that experience, it was so fulfilling and an opportunity to give back to a class of graduates. And I thought, gosh, I could do that. And I had valuable insights to share with that group of people. Um, yeah, so just those two things I often I'm constantly pulling into my decision making, and continue to lean on them in my own career. And I think they're valuable things for the next generation to have front of mind as they push forward in their careers as well.
Yes, that's very inspirational. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate your time today with us.
You're so welcome, and thank you for the work that you do in allowing people to come on and give back, sharing through the
Ah,
conversations like this.
I love it. I love it. It's a labor of love. Thank you, everyone, today for joining us at the Give Back Lab. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and stay tuned for our next episode. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today in the Give Back Lab. If today's conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you just feel seen, share it forward. That's how change begins. Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking truth, and giving back in your own way. The lab is always open.